So thanks, Ross. How do you define the Landcorp brand?
The Landcorp brand is, to my mind, all about doing a whole lot of good land development and infrastructure development to meet the needs of Western Australia. If you look at our logo, it can be seen as a cog, a series of cogs, or a whole lot of people holding hands. So it's meant to indicate that we work very much in collaboration with a whole lot of other people, within government, private sector, whoever it takes, with communities, to deliver on what their aspirations are in the property game.
Yeah, leading on from that, how do you define the role of Landcorp, giving due consideration to the importance of public-private partnerships?
We've got a number of objectives. One is, government has one of us because of areas of market failure. So that might generally be in industrial areas where big industrial estates need a lot of upfront investment, high risk, not areas where a lot of private sector players choose to put their capital. Regional areas, similarly, regional areas can be a bit problematic for private developers. So government has an expectation that Landcorp will operate in that space. They also want leadership and innovation. So we can do some things the private sector can't. We can take some risks that private sector can't. So that's another legitimate role. And also we can act as an agency that can collect the profits out of surplus government land. So taxpayer might have held on to surplus government land for a long time in different, it might be school sites or health sites or whatever it is. And we're a collection agency because we can undertake good quality developments that meet the needs of the communities that often surround those sites, and on the way through generate profits that feed back into government coffers to fund other government priorities.
But often you do actually work with the private sector in partnership, or at least they do projects for you, don't they?
We've got a lot of partnerships, particularly in the residential area. We'd love to have partnerships in the industrial land area, so we're working on that. But in the residential area, we've got partnerships with virtually every major property player in Australia. So Lendlease, Mirvac, Stockland, Cedar Woods, Australand, Satterley, the list goes on. And those partnerships acknowledge that the private sector have a lot of competency in that space, probably more than the Landcorps of the world. So we're good at solving complex issues. In terms of getting really schmick on the ground outcomes, we think the private sector does it very well. And by having private sector partnerships, we retain a financial interest and an interest in whatever the vision and outcome should be. But we use the arms and legs of the private sector, which frees up our capacity, the people of Landcorp, and also a fair bit of our dollars, to focus on those higher priority strategic things that government sees us as existing for.
So how's your approach to communication changing, particularly given the new media and the broader range of audiences you need to address?
Yeah, that's challenging, particularly if you've been around for a long time and as I have. So we're seeking to use all forms of media. Direct engagement is obviously still very important in terms of communication, but all the social media we're accessing. You might be familiar with the C2030 process. So we ran a series of community summits. One of them, a major one in Perth, was all about, well, what should Perth look like in the next 20, 30 years? We ran something similar in Broome because Broome's going through a high growth phenomenon, and then acknowledging that there are a lot of other places that maybe aren't so high growth, but they have similar aspirations of what they could be. And we ran a similar exercise in Carnarvon last year. So that was all about trying to access a very broad spectrum of community, hear from them about what their concerns, interests and views about the future are, particularly engaging the young, because what we often find with community engagement is that it's the older demographic that gets engaged because they probably have more time and interest, and what we want to hear from is a broad spectrum of community. So, I mean, communication, you have to press all the buttons, and there are a lot more buttons now than there used to be.
There sure are. What are the priorities and what do you see as the challenges for Landcorp in 2012?
Well, as a government entity, we're vitally interested in making sure that we do what government wants. So we don't have a separate agenda at Landcorp. Our development agenda is whatever the government's priorities are. So I think it's reasonable as the government heads into an election to expect Landcorp to have delivered on its property priorities So we're very focused on making sure we deliver on those things. And that might be Pilbara cities. It might be the Ord project. It's all about residential land supply. It's about trying to get some development happening around rail stations. It's a whole range of things. We've got about 150 projects that are active. So that's quite a challenging exercise managing it. Excellent systems, excellent staff, very highly committed and enthusiastic people, which make this place a pleasure to work in. In terms of challenges, I think everything is very complex. People think and expect land development to be easy. We seem to have plenty of land in WA, but there are a lot of processes to go through, a lot of checks and balances, environmental, native title, Aboriginal heritage, planning, local planning, state planning, federal environmental. There's quite a complexity that we need to deal with. We should be expert at that, and I think we are. So that's a major challenge to not only move through those processes, make sure the rest of the government's aligned. So we depend on our colleagues in other government agencies and local government to be similarly trying to achieve the outcomes that we are. So that gets back to that communication issue and the need for us to make sure we communicate well with them, that we have good working relationships. So that's sort of the life of Landcorp.
And what role will marketing communication play in addressing both those priorities and challenges?
Well, I think it's all about marketing and communication. So marketing and communications, we can't do what we have to do if we don't engage a whole lot of other parties, make sure that they understand where we're trying to get to, we understand where they're coming from. Are there win-win solutions so that we meet their needs at the same time as we deliver on the outcomes expected of us? We want well-engaged, well-informed decision-making, otherwise we suffer the pushback. So if we don't have communities that understand and agree with the direction of development, then we're in trouble. And development is all about change, and as you know, change can be very challenging for lots of people because we're surrounded by change, and a lot of that we might not like. And so I think there's a natural tendency, particularly in Perth, to resist change and then ask, what were you after, what were you trying to do? And so what we need to do, and we need to get a lot better at it, is community engagement, again using all of those social media to try to find out up front what is it that people want, what don't they want, and how do we assist them realise their dreams rather than how do we impose our views on those communities. So I think that's part of the challenge, and marketing and communications, as I say, is central.
What's Landcorp up to in the northwest these days?
I think it's going brilliantly. If you think of Pilbara Cities, Pilbara Cities was announced by the Premier and Brendan Grills in November 2009, so 2 and a bit years ago. If you went up to Port Hedland or Karratha today or Newman, the place looks like a major construction site. There's so much happening. We've got high-rise apartments happening in Karratha, major town centre revitalisation happening in South Hedland, the opening of the main street a month or two ago, in Newman similarly. So these places are proposed to be transformed into, in the case of Karratha and Hedland, cities of 50,000 plus people, and Newman to be a hub of 15,000 people. So the planning's in place, and a lot of that work has been expedited through local government and through planning. So it's been done in rapid fire time, and we're now in delivery mode. And that planning embraced the community, local government planning, all the agencies that needed to be involved, and said, what sort of future do you want for your town or your city? Do you want it to be sprawling? Do you want it to be stacked? Do you want a combo? And so the community basically dictated the form of their city, and now it's coming out of the ground.
Do you think that people in the metropolitan area are sufficiently engaged with what's happening in the northwest, and what sorts of opportunities can flow through to the community living south of the 26th parallel?
I think again it gets back to that marketing communications. If you're involved day by day in Pilbara Cities and the huge array of projects that we and private developers are undertaking, you assume that everyone is. And it's therefore always a surprise when you talk to people and they're really not aware of it. They maybe have never been to the Pilbara. A lot of major people in boardrooms on the east coast have never been to the Pilbara. and yet it's the engine room for a lot of Australia's growth. You know, WA now accounts for almost 50% of the nation's exports. So there's huge opportunity up there. Landcorp's tried to take a whole lot of people up to the Pilbara. So whether it's banking groups or industrial developer groups or other investors, institutional investors, to try to open their eyes to the opportunities. So I don't think we can ever put enough effort into conveying to people what's going on, because I'm forever surprised at the low level of awareness, which gets back to the Landcorps of the world needing to better articulate it and keep repeating it in lots of different ways so that people hear it.
I'll ask you to be a bit of a soothsayer here and tell us, what's your outlook for the residential and industrial markets in Western Australia over the next 12 months or so?
Okay. Over the longer term, I mean, where else would you want to be? Western Australia and maybe parts of Canada are the economic hotspots of the world. We've got, I think the order of magnitude is 200 billion of resource investment in WA that is not just on the drawing boards but essentially committed. So Western Australia is going to go through major growth. Population forecasts talk about 50,000-60,000 increase in population a year, so about another 800,000 people by the middle of the next decade. That's going to of itself generate huge residential land needs. At least a quarter of that 800,000 increase will go to regional WA. So the metro and regional areas of WA are both going to be very challenged. We've got a very competitive development industry that I think will respond and provide housing. There's a lot more innovative product coming out now. In terms of residential markets over the next 12 months, at the upper end in Perth, it's still very, very flat. At the lower end, there are definite green shoots or signs of life, particularly in terms of some of the more innovative, affordable product that the builders and developers are putting out. And that's responding well to the lifestyle opportunities that younger people are wanting. In the industrial sphere, whether you're talking metropolitan or regional areas, it's strong the further north you go. And that's again driven by the resources sector and that major investment boost that is occurring. In the northwest, residential is very, very strong. We can't, and the private sector can't deliver enough residential land. So I think, yes, it's patchy, and always has it been so. I mean, we've seen the office market in Perth is incredibly strong, but there's a clear expectation that with the population increase, the rental increases, the build-up of demand, underlying demand for residential, that we're going to see an uplift in the metropolitan area residentially over the next 12 months.
Finally, Ross, just one other thing. What do you see as the future of double brick construction in the residential building industry in Western Australia?
They don't do double brick anywhere else. So double brick historically came out of a very smart marketing campaign by the brick makers, and that's now become part of the psyche almost of West Australians, where there's a view that if you're not building in double brick, then maybe it won't be as saleable down the track. But I think there's a lot more building technologies now that are alternative technologies that are coming into play. As you say, if you go to the northwest, increasingly it's modular product, and you'd expect, particularly as skill shortages might kick in. At the moment, the boom, if you like, in the northwest of the state is sucking a lot of labour capacity out of the construction sector, the house building sector, but the house building sector is relatively lowly performing at the moment. As soon as demand picks up, it may not be able to access that skill base, and therefore the industry, the residential sector, will have to look at different building technologies, much more modular product, and I think double brick will always be a West Australian, part of the West Australian vernacular, but it will diminish over time.
Well, thanks for your time, Ross. Really appreciate it.